tired of ads crashing your comedy podcast party? Good news. Ad-free listening on Amazon Music is included with your Prime membership. Just head to amazon.com/ad-free comedy to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads. Enjoy thousands of Acast shows ad-free for Prime subscribers. Some shows may have ads.
The Two-Footed Podcast is brought to you by EPLindex.com and our presenting sponsor, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. A virtual privacy network allows you to go online, change your location, access things you're geo-blocked from, while keeping your data safe. So, as an example, if you are a UK expat and want access to BBC iPlayer to watch Match of the Day, or ITV Hub, or all four, but you get that message that says this content is not available in your location, a Liberty Shield VPN gets you around that block, allows you to watch whatever you want on those services while also keeping your data safe. And it goes further than that. It allows you to open up Netflix's entire library by just changing your IP address. Liberty Shield is the #1 rated VPN provider on Trustpilot with 5-star ratings across the board. So go to libertyshield.com right now, use the code EPL25 and get either the hardware package or the software package. The hardware package is a router that you plug into your existing router, and any item you want to change the IP address on, be it your phone or your television, you connect that to the new Liberty Shield router. All other items can remain connected to your existing router. There's also a software package which is instantly downloadable to your device and you can get using straight away. Again, libertyshield.com, EPL25 for 25% off at checkout. We're also brought to you by Home of Hopcroft, a giftware and homeware company located in Scotland but shipping worldwide. Check out homeofhopcroft.co.uk and do check out the EPL Index and Anfield Index shops, which you'll find on Etsy. Use the codes EPL10 or RED10 for 10% off at checkout. And lastly, do remember to check out A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. That podcast is on this feed before every Premier League match week. And then the EPL Roundtable, hosted by Kevin DeVries, on its own EPL Roundtable feed. So just search EPL Roundtable in your podcast device. And that's out after every match week. Now, on with the show. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Wednesday, the 17th of January. I hope you're all well and having a pleasant day. It is a balmy 2 degrees. Next Tuesday, apparently, is going to be 11 degrees, so it's shorts weather. Winter's over. Get the shorts out. Right. We had FA Cup football last night. We had some really exciting games. None more so than Wolves 3, Brentford 2. Brentford went 1-0 up through Nathan Collins. Nelson Semedo equalised for Wolves. Then Neil Maupay put Brentford back in front before Nathan Fraser, who hopefully will spend the next 15 years of his life banging in goals for the Irish national team, made it 2-2. And then Matthias Cunha, in stoppage time at the end of the first half of extra time, stepped up and scored the winner from the penalty spot to send Wolves through to a Black Country derby with West Brom. That game will be televised. Bolton 1, Luton Town 2. Dion Charles put Bolton 1 up. Tahith Chong equalised 4 minutes later. Chidozie Ogbene with the winner for Luton in the second half, and they are through. And Luton can now look forward to taking on one of the teams that is playing tonight. So they have to wait and see. Wait and find out what is in store for them. Birmingham 2, Hull City 1. Jason Lockillo put Hull 1 up. Jay Stansfield equalised in the second half. and Koji Miyoshi scored the winner in stoppage time to give Brum the win. Massive win for them, hopefully confidence boosting, and hopefully it can spur them on for the rest of the season and get them back on track, because it had been fairly ugly to watch what was going on there. They had a manager doing well, sacked him, got rid of him, brought in Rooney. They went from like 7th to the edge of the relegation spots in the championship with 24 teams. So a massive collapse, but hopefully the FA Cup win and the subsequent run that they'll have to go on now, they could go on now, can build some confidence. They play away to Leicester City in the next round, and Leicester obviously are running away with the championship, so it'll be a tough game for Birmingham. Eastleigh 1, Newport County 3. Aaron Wildig opened the scoring. Paul McCollum equalised for Eastleigh, but then James Clark and Will Evans wrapped it up, and Newport County will face Manchester United in the 4th round of the FA Cup. That is a 4:30 kickoff on the Sunday of next weekend, which is FA Cup weekend, and that will obviously be a televised game. Finally then, the upset of the night, Bristol City 1, West Ham United 0. Tommy Conway with the only goal of the game. Saeed Benrahma sent off for West Ham, who huffed and puffed and didn't blow anyone's house down, and out they go. In fairness, West Ham did rest some players. They played a shape, a 3-4-2-1. That's not really their way of playing. They have played it under Moyes, but it's not really how they go about their business. They are without a number of players, but still, losing to a championship side will be hugely disappointing, considering they were drawn at home in the first leg. That'll be hugely disappointing to David Moyes, because this was probably their only real shot at silverware. I don't fancy them to win the Europa League. They'll think they have a chance, but I don't fancy it. So tonight we have 3 more games. Blackpool take on Nottingham Forest. That game ended 2-2 first time out. Blackpool had gone 2-0 up at the City Ground, but Forest came back and got a draw. The winner of that game will play Bristol City. So Bristol can sit back now and watch this game tonight and then figure out what they want to do against Forest, who'd be a Premier League team coming down to them, and they'd have to go full strength if they want to advance, or Blackpool, who are a League One team coming to them, and potentially then they can rotate a little bit more. I think they should be going full strength regardless, but you know how managers do. Also tonight, all these games are 7:45 kickoffs. Also tonight we have Bristol Rovers at home to Norwich. That game ended 1-1 first time out. Ashley Barnes put Norwich ahead. Grant Ward equalised 5 minutes later. The winner of that one travels to Anfield to take on Liverpool. So not a favourable outcome. Though, if you're Bristol Rovers, a 4th round trip to Anfield is probably the dream. You know, Anfield, the Emirates, Old Trafford, you know, one of the elite glamour clubs. Norwich players are probably scarred by the history of the club at Anfield. Not that there's many of them left there who've, you know, been and gotten a good beating, but Norwich over the years have taken many's to hiding at the hand of Liverpool Football Club. Final game tonight then is the big one of the night. It's the All Premier League affair, Everton versus Crystal Palace. This was a pretty ugly game last time out. It ended 0-0. Dominic Calvert-Lewin was sent off. That red card was since overturned. However, because the rules are stupid, if Calvert-Lewin gets sent off again this season on a straight red, he won't just get a 3-game ban, he'd get an extra game, because this still sits on his record. So he'd get 4 games. Even though it was the wrong decision at the time and it was rescinded, he could still get punished for it. He could still actually end up with a 1-game suspension for this if he picks up another red card. Everton or Crystal Palace will play host to Luton. So we're pretty much shaped up for round 4, which is, like I said, next weekend, beginning on the Thursday night. You would have Bournemouth versus Swansea. On the Friday night, you'll get Bristol City at home to Nottingham Forest or Blackpool. Sheffield Wednesday at home to Coventry. Chelsea at home to Villa. And Tottenham at home to Manchester United. Now, why those games are on a Friday, I have no idea. But surely both of those games should be on television. Like, they're the 2 big ties of the round. And there's a 15-minute difference in the kickoff times. Chelsea Villa kicks off at 7:45, and Tottenham City kick off at 8. Are they going to put them on different channels at the same time to compete against each other? That doesn't seem right. Doesn't seem like the best course of action. Surely one of those games could have been flexed to the Saturday. On the Saturday, you get Ipswich versus Maidstone, Leicester versus Birmingham, Leeds versus Plymouth, Crystal Palace or Everton against Luton, Sheffield United versus Brighton and Hove Albion, and Fulham versus Newcastle in what has to be a must-win for Eddie Howe. Then on the Sunday, it's West Brom against Wolves, Watford against Southampton, Liverpool against Norwich or Bristol Rovers, and then Newport County versus Manchester United in the big TV slot for the day, which I have no issue with. I have no issue at all with that being a televised game. I would personally have Ipswich versus Maidstone on TV, and I hope it is. I haven't actually checked, because it's, Maidstone are by far the lowest ranked team left. And then on the Monday night, it is Blackburn Rovers versus Wrexham. And in no way, shape, or form are Blackburn contributing to that being on television. That's on television because it's Wrexham. So there we go. That's where we sit with the FA Cup. Let's bounce around the leagues and see what's what. We have Girona top in La Liga, 49 points from 20 games. Really, really impressive. Only 1 defeat all season. Scoring the most goals in the division. Now, defensively, they're not great, but they're not terrible either. Real Madrid are 1 point behind them, but do have a game in hand. Athletic Club are sitting in 3rd, which is an incredible performance from them. They've played 20 games. They're 7 points behind Real. Barcelona are level on points with Athletic Club, but they have a game in hand. 3 points back is Atletico Madrid, who are in a bit of poor form. They also have the game in hand. Then it's a 6-point gap to Real Sociedad. Then we get Real Betis, Valencia, Las Palmas, Getafe, Rayo Vallecano, Osasuna, Alaves, Mallorca, Villarreal, Celta Vigo, Sevilla, Cadiz, Granada, and bottom of the bunch sit Almeria. So very clearly the story of the season is Girona and what they're accomplishing. And if you haven't had the chance to see them yet, I do recommend it. They are a very fun team. They're actually playing tonight. They're playing Rayo Vallecano in the round of 16 of the Copa del Rey. Then they're home to Sevilla on Sunday night. That might be a good one to watch. Some really, really talented players here. Now, obviously, they are part of the City Football Group. So while they are a great underdog story in as far as they're right there competing with Real Madrid, Athletic Club, which don't have the money, but they're a big club, Barca and Atleti, they're still a much better off club than most teams because they've got the power of the City Football Group behind them and the finances of the City Football Group. Managed by Michel, former Rayo Vallecano and Murcia midfielder. He was last at Huesca. He previously had managed Rayo Vallecano, a little bit unheralded when he was appointed manager of Girona. He took them from the second division into La Liga. And I do think he is likely to be one who gets some serious offers in the summer. Because we know how clubs can be. They can be so reactionary. And if you've done a really good job and overperformed somewhere, it can often be the case that a big ball of money comes your way from a club who've maybe decided to make a move and want to make a bit of a splash. And, if they end up finishing second or third, that's an easy sell to your fan base. Well, this guy finished third in La Liga with Girona, ahead of Atletico Madrid, ahead of Real Sociedad, ahead of Real Betis and Athletic Bilbao and whoever else. There's some players in this squad that are well known, but also well worth your while keeping an eye on. So Christian Stuani is one everybody will know, the Uruguayan striker. He's been around a long time. He's the club captain. Viktor Shankov, formerly of Dynamo Kiev, Ukrainian international. He went there last January on a bargain deal because his contract was running out with Kiev. And he has been very, very impressive. You've got Artem Dovbyk, who's their top scorer. Another one that came from Ukraine, from Dnipro, another regular in the Ukrainian national team. You've got Paulo Gazzaniga. Everybody should be aware of him. Played for many years in England. Well, played might be a stretch, actually. Spent a lot of years in England with Gillingham, Southampton, Spurs, and Fulham. And was always just sort of seen as he's a good lower league keeper. He's a solid backup, but that's about it. Like in the 4 years he spent at Spurs, he played 37 games, 22 in the Premier League. And one of them was the 1920 season where he played 18 because of the injury to Lloris. He was at Southampton while they were a Premier League team for 5 years. Now, admittedly, he did spend time on loan. For 6 years. He did spend a full year on loan in between that. And then he was loaned out again. But he played 21 times in the league for them. He went to Fulham in the Championship and couldn't nail down the starting spot a few years ago. So that's been his career. But he's playing out of his skin in this Girona team. Daley Blind is there. Obviously former Ajax, Manchester United and Bayern Munich player. He's 33 now. He's towards the end of his career, but his experience, his ball-playing ability, his versatility have been vital to them. He's always been underrated. The spell at United was the worst thing that could have happened to him. He's like one of many that have gone there in the last 10 years. The worst thing that could have happened to him was that move. Yangel Herrera, I've mentioned him a bunch of times over the years on this podcast. He was at City for 6 years. I don't think he ever played for them. Had a bunch of loans. I first saw him when he went on loan to Huesca and he looked impressive. Then he had 2 years at Granada where he was brilliant. And I thought that's where he'd end up staying. But he got loaned to Espanyol. Then he had a year on loan with Girona last season. And finally in the summer, City sort of agreed that it was time to let him leave on a permanent deal. And he's been brilliant this season. He is well worth your while watching. He's probably missed his window for a big move, but there's Vidal-esque traits to his game. He's a lot of fun to watch. Eric Garcia, formerly of Manchester City, in on loan from Barcelona, and to his credit, has been a vital part of the team and how they've worked. You've got Pablo Torre there, a really exciting young Spanish midfielder, also in on loan from Barca. Came through at Racing Santander, and when Barca bought him, it was like, oh, have they found another Pedri? So they bought him very young, and he was really, really exciting. Didn't get much of a run at Barca. He's been pretty good the couple of games I've watched him for Girona this year. He's not an every game starter. I've watched them without him, so I don't think he's an every game starter, but he is a really good player, and he's contributing to the success that they're having. Jan Couto's an interesting one. Young Brazilian. He's been there 2 years now on loan. Can play a couple of different positions. One to keep an eye on. He's owned by City, but he's one to keep an eye on. I think this might be his third year there on loan. But I think he had a break in between. I think he went to Braga. I think he was Girona, Braga, and now 2 years at Girona. I could be wrong. I think that's his path since he joined City. The two players that are, for me, the ones to really keep an eye on here, the ones that I think will get big money moves off the back of this, are Arnau Martinez, who plays right back or centre back, but primarily right back. I think he is absolutely outstanding. I think he can be a better on the ball version of Ivanovic if he continues to develop this way. We did the Anfield Index transfer committee pod a month ago, maybe 5-6 weeks ago. And we were talking about needing, potentially needing a right back for cover, or if Trent was to move into midfield. And he was the one I sold Dan, Gags, and Mo on, because I just think there's the real possibility that we're watching the early days of a very special defender with him. And he's excellent on the ball. And then on the other side is Miguel Gutierrez. Now, what's interesting with Gutierrez is he came through the Real Madrid Academy and joined Girona, not the summer just gone, the summer before. Real have a couple of different clauses on that deal. I don't know if one of them is a buyback. I know there's a sell-on. I think they own still part of his right. There's something weird with the deal. Real need a left back this coming summer. And while they want Alphonso Davies, I think that's been fairly widely reported. Bayern don't seem to be looking to sell Alphonso Davies this summer. And I do wonder if they might pivot towards Gutierrez. Really good getting forward, excellent on the ball, fantastic crosser of the ball. And he's pretty decent defensively. Like, he's not a great defender, but he's decent. And he tries hard, which, half of the battle with defending is to actually give a shit, to actually put the effort in. And he does. And now sometimes he can get caught too far upfield and he might amble back a little bit. But generally, when he's in the vicinity of where he's meant to be, he'll put the work in. So a lot of reasons to watch Girona. Like I said, the football is very, very good. But the two fullbacks, for me, are the ones to keep an eye on for the future. Because I think Gutierrez is definitely going somewhere in the summer. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was Real. And Martinez, I mean, I think he's going to be very, very good at a baseline. Very, very good. I think he has the potential to be great. And for the Spanish national team, they're in a really good position where they have him and they have Ivan Fresneda, the right back who's, where did he go? Sporting. He's at Sporting. He came through it via the lid. Those two, they might be ideal in a back three with wing backs. Fresneda as a wing back, Martinez as a right side centre back in a three. That might be the best way to use both of them.
Tired of ads crashing your comedy podcast party? Good news. Ad-free listening on Amazon Music is included with your Prime membership. Just head to amazon.com/ad-free comedy to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads. Enjoy thousands of Acast shows ad-free for Prime subscribers. Some shows may have ads.
And plus you've got Balde at Barcelona is perfectly suited to being the left wing back in that scenario. Whether or not Spain would go to a back three, I don't know. But if you are a fan of the Spanish national team, that's quite exciting to have those three in defence. There's a couple of others that will surely kick on as well. But then we know about the group they've got in midfield with Pedri and with Gavi. And I think Pablo Torre has that kind of talent. Fermin Lopez certainly looks like he has that kind of talent to make his way into the senior team. So there's no guarantees, obviously, but it's the beginning of maybe the next outstanding Spanish team to have 3/4 of a long-term defence. If it's a back five, sorry, 3/5, I should say. Plus, you've got two incredible prospects in midfield in Gavi and Pedri. The attack, I'm less sure on, but Lamine Yamal, obviously, special talent. Ansu Fati will wait and see. Yeremy Pino will wait and see. Nico Williams will wait and see. These are very, very talented players, but, development's not linear, so there's no guarantees. But what should be guaranteed is you should watch at least one Girona game over the next couple of weeks if you get the chance. Moving on to Serie A, where I suppose the biggest shock is that Napoli sit 8th in the league, having won it last season. They did manage to keep most of their team together. They lost Kim, obviously, to Bayern, and they just didn't replace him. And then they lost Spalletti. Well, first they lost Spalletti because of their own stupidity. They replaced him badly, and then they sacked him and they replaced him badly. And now they've got Walter Mazzari, who's just not very good. But let's go to Roma first. Roma sit 9th in the league. They have won one of their last 5. They've taken 4 points from their last 5 games. That is not good enough. Not by a long stretch. In the Coppa Italia, they got dumped out in the quarterfinals by their biggest rival, Lazio. In the Europa League, they did finish 2nd in their group, but it was a group with Slavia Prague, Servette, and Sheriff Tiraspol. So finishing and getting out of that group isn't really all that impressive. And they're going to play Feyenoord in the knockout rounds, and that's a tough draw for them. Really is a tough draw for them. You look at the squad they've got, and it's easy to look at it and say, oh, they haven't spent a lot of money in the last couple of years. And that's true, but the reason they haven't spent a lot of money in the last couple of years is because they can't, because they spent so much money in Mourinho's first year that it kind of screwed them into a bad position. In the summer, they brought in Hassemauer from Lyon, who started really well at Roma. Obviously had a few years of really bad stagnation at Lyon. When he first broke in at Lyon, he looked like he was going to be a really, really special player. And then, for whatever reason, he stagnated. He ended up staying too long. He fell out with the club. He fell out with different people. And his career hasn't gone as planned. He's still young. He's still got the potential to be a very good player. But they brought him in on a free. They also signed Evan and Ndicka on a free. They brought in Ricardo Solbes and Leandro Paredes they signed from PSG. They loaned in Diego Loriente, Rasmus Christensen, Renato Sanchez, who's been a disaster, Serdar Azmoun, Romelu Lukaku, and Dean Huijsen. It just hasn't really worked for them. Like, they sold a bunch of players as well. They didn't bring in a bunch of money, but they turned over quite a lot of the squad. The big sale was Roger Ibanez, who went off to play in Saudi. But they turned over the squad quite a bit at his request, because last season they'd finished 6th in the league. They got into the Europa League final and finished runners-up. Obviously, slightly controversial, that one. But, he hasn't finished higher than 6th in the league. He did win the Europa Conference League, but again, it's just not competition that has that gravitas yet. And it felt like they just had gotten stuck in the mud. Like, you look at Rui Patricio's the goalkeeper. Like, he wasn't good with Wolves in his last season. They paid money for him. They've got Milos Svilar there, who I do like, but he's purely the Europa League goalkeeper. He didn't work out when he was at Benfica, but he seems to have kind of bounced back from that disappointment. And he's been pretty good. The few games I've seen him, he's been pretty good. You know, you look in the defence, Rick Karsdrup. Last year, Mourinho was telling him to go and find a new club. And Dick is good. Chris Smalling, who'd been so important to them, now squad player. Diego Loriente comes in on loan. He hasn't impressed me when I've watched him, but he's starting every game. Gianluca Mancini's starting every game. They've got Ziki Celik there, who's, I think, a good right back. I think he's better than Rick Karsdrup, but he seems to be the backup. Well, actually, I think he's third choice because Rasmus Christensen, who's in on loan, is starting. And Spinazzola is starting, obviously, at left wing back. Marash Kumbula, who, when he went to Roma, he went there over pretty much every other top club in Serie A. And Mourinho's never really given him much of an opportunity. He had a 2-year loan with an obligation to buy. Last year, he played 7 games in the league, 12 in all competitions. This season, I don't think he's kicked a ball for them. Now, I don't know if he's been injured, but maybe he has. But still, like, he should be much further along. But when your defence is Rick Karsdrup, Diego Loriente, Spinazzola, and Christensen, 2 of whom are in on loan, 2 of whom not great, it doesn't fill you with promise. He hasn't. Normally when Mourinho goes in somewhere, do you know what? We'll do Mourinho after the break. We'll come back to them. Let's just work through the rest of the leagues for the moment. Inter are top, 2 points clear of Juve, who are having a really good season. Then it's a 7-point gap to Milan. But I think Milan might be one to keep an eye on the back half of the season. Things are starting to click for them a little bit. Then you've got an 8-point gap to Fiorentina, who are a point clear of Atalanta. Fiorentina, sort of the big overachievers this season after Juve. Then Atalanta, then Lazio, then Bologna, then you get to Napoli and Roma. Then it's Torino, Monza, Genoa. First season back up, doing very well. Did just sell their best centre-back, but we'll see. You've got Lecce, Sassuolo, Frosinone, Udinese, Cagliari, Verona, Empoli, and Salernitana. We'll move quickly. Let's go to Ligue 1. In France, we have PSG top, 8 points clear of Nice. You might as well just hand them the title now. Then it's Brest, Monaco, Lille, Reims, Marseille, Lens, Strasbourg, Rennes, Le Havre, Montpellier, Nantes, Toulouse, Metz, Lyon, who have climbed off the foot of the table. They did win 3 in a row. They lost the last game, but they won 3 in a row before that, which has lifted them from the foot of the table to the brink of safety. They're level in points at Metz above them. They're 1 point behind Toulouse, 2 points behind Nantes and Montpellier. Lyon should stay up. And I believe they've made a signing. I think Gift Urban is on his way to Lyon, which, if that's true, that is going to be a really, really exciting signing for them. He is supremely talented. And I think if you were looking at him and Ernest Namua as 2/3 of a front 3 or half of a front 4, like in a 4-4-2 or whatever, 4-2-4, I think that's really exciting. And you've still got Rayan Cherki there as well, who's another incredibly gifted young forward. So if that deal gets done and they get him in across the line, That's going to be very, very good for Lyon for the long term. Now, they still have other major issues, but they've got talent in midfield. The defensive group is where you'd have real concerns about them. Dejan, the Pebble, Lovren, and Duje Kaleta, who, whatever is smaller than a Pebble, is kind of what he is. He's like Lovren Jr. Yeah, moving on. Clermont Foot and Laurent are bottom. Laurent are bottom. This time last year, Laurent were challenging for Champions League. They ended up finishing 10th. They got bought, you'll remember, by Bill Foley, who owns Bournemouth. And while it's gone really well at Bournemouth, it has not gone well at all at Laurent. And they are bottom and have lost the last 4 in a row and are heading for relegation. I'll be really interested to see what they do in this transfer window. Will they spend to try and get their way out of it, like they did with Bournemouth last January? But this is a mess, an absolute mess. They haven't changed the manager yet. Loic Ferry's been there a few years now, 5, 6 years. When did he take over? No, not Loic Perry. What's his name? Pellissier? Oh, they did change man. They changed manager in the summer. They got rid of Pellissier, who'd been there for a few years. Where's he now? He is with Auxerre. And Regis Lebis is the current manager. He took over. Oh, I'm an idiot. He took over at the beginning of last season. So he's, to be fair, did well last year, has not done well this year. Last year, they ended up in 10th, but they were second after 11 games and still in the mix at the turn of the year. They were in like 6th, and now they're bottom. But they sold a bunch of players last year. And then they didn't seem to do much in this past summer. Roman Favre, he came in on loan. For Moise Mendy, they signed Isaac Toure. They sold Terem Moffi. They sold Enzo Lafie. They sold Ibrahima Kone. Those are all important players. For Moise Mendy, he's not bad. Isaac Toure. 6'9". Oh, he's the guy that came through at Le Havre. Yeah. Went to Marseille and it didn't work out, and he ended up there. Okay, that's where he is now. And Tosin Agon. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some serious changes there in the next couple of weeks. Because as things stand, you are rattling towards the second division. You've got Timu Bakayoko. Didn't they sign? Aren't they the ones that signed Benjamin Mendy? Yeah. A dreadful gang of lads. Get them relegated, get them out of the division. Moving on to the Bundesliga, where Bayer Leverkusen continue to be the story of the season. Still top, still unbeaten, 4 points clear of Bayern. Bayern do have a game in hand. Then we've got Stuttgart, also massively overachieving in 3rd. Then Leipzig, Dortmund slogging away in 5th. They have now added Sancho and Maatsen, so let's see how that works for them. Then you've got Eintracht, Freiburg, Hoffenheim, Heidenheim, huge overperformance from them. Gladbach toiling in mid-table. Wolfsburg toiling in mid-table. Augsburg, Werder Bremen, unbeaten in 4. 3 of them might have been draws, but we're taking it. Bochum, Union Berlin have figured things out a little bit, and they're now 15th. Mine's dreadful gang of lads. They're in the relegation promotion playoff spot. And then Cologne and Darmstadt are in the bottom two. But Mainz and Cologne are level on points. So hopefully Mainz will get relegated this season. That'll be nice. Portugal, where Sporting are 1 point clear of Benfica, who are then 4 points clear of Porto, who are 5 points clear of Braga. Then it goes Vitória, Moreirense, Famalicão, Farense, Boa Vista, Casapia, Estrela, Portimonense, Estoril, Aruca, Gil Vicente, Rio Ave, Vizela, and Chaves, looking very likely to find themselves playing at a lower level next season. In the Eredivisie, PSV Eindhoven are running away with it. 17 games, 17 wins, scored 59 goals, conceded 7. That is, excuse me, that is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. The 12 points clear of Feyenoord. Then it goes Twente, Alkmaar, Ajax, who have hugely turned things around for themselves and have won 4 of the last 5, but are about to sign Jordan Henderson and piss all over the legacy of the beautiful game, total football, and Johan Cruyff. Sparta Rotterdam, Go Ahead Eagles, NEC, Heerenveen, PEC Zwolle, Fortuna Sittard, Almere, Utrecht, Heracles, Excelsior, Walwick, Vitesse Arnhem, and Volendam. Vitesse Arnhem having a mess of a season. They have work to do. But what a season from PSV Eindhoven. Like, think about what's happened there in the last 12 months. So, last year, Feyenoord win the league. But in the January transfer window, Cody Gakpo leaves. Noni Mudeki leaves. That's arguably 2 of their 3 best players at that point. Both of them out the door. They bring in Torgan Hazard on loan and Patrick Van Aanholt on loan. And they stumble along to the end of the season. They finished second, largely because Ajax were an abomination. And Ruud van Nistelrooy is basically sacked right at the end of the season. They did win the Cup. They did win the Johan Cruyff Shield. We go into this season. They lose Xavi Simons. They lose Ibrahim Sangaré. And they lose Eric Gutierrez. They bring in Ricardo Pepi, the American striker who had flopped at Augsburg. They bring in Noah Lang, super talented but inconsistent and a questionable attitude. They bring in Malik Thielman on loan. They spend pretty big money on Jordi Schuiten to bring him back to the Netherlands from Bologna. They bring back Chucky Lozano from Napoli. They sign Armel Bella-Kotchap on loan. I'd forgotten that's where he went. And they sign Serginho Dest on loan. They appoint Peter Bos as manager. Now, Peter Bos had a good spell at Ajax, but since then, it's been one failure after another. Like, spectacular failure with Dortmund. Disappointing with Leverkusen more than a failure, but just disappointing, given the talent he had there. And then a failure with Lyon. Seen as a huge gamble when they appointed him. He'd been out of work for, a year? Over a year? They appoint him and he goes on this unbelievable run. 28 games total, 23 wins, 4 draws, and 1 defeat. He just has this team humming. absolutely humming. They won the Johan Cruyff Shield, which is basically like the charity shield. Um, in the Champions League, they knocked out Sturm Graz, hammered Rangers, and were in the group with Arsenal, where they finished second. The only defeat they've had this season was away to Arsenal. They'll play Dortmund in the round of 16. They've got Walter Benitez in goal, Jordan Teze, Andre Ramelow, Oliver Buscagli, and Serginho Dest. That's the defence they're rolling out with most weeks. Bella Kotchap's not even getting regular game time. Like, it's not a bad defence by any stretch, but these aren't elite level talents that are there. These are a group of players that, in many cases, have kind of bounced around. And for some reason, it's working. In midfield, Gust Hill is playing regularly, Schuten's playing regularly. Sabari and Malik Thielman seem to be rotating a lot. Joey Veerman is the one consistent presence, and he is very good. But it's amazing to me that he's still in the Eredivisie at 25. I thought he would have been gone years ago. And then in attack, like, you've got Luke de Jong. He's the primary source of goals. You've got Noah Lang, Johan Bakayoko, Ricardo Pepe, Chucky Lozano, and Yorbi Vertessen, sort of rotating in the other roles around him. And all of them are playing well. Like, Vertessen couldn't get a look in last year. He was sent on loan to Belgium. This year, he's not a starter, but he's a really important contributor off the bench. And yet they're running away with the league, and they're through in the Champions League. And if they were just running away with the league and they'd gotten dumped out of the Champions League, I'd just say, well, the Eredivisie is crap, so that's probably what it is. But the league is not good, but still, that's an unbelievable run. 17 wins in a row. And it's not just like they're winning in impressive fashion. 2-0, 3-1, 4-0, 4-0, 4-0, 3-0, 3-1, 4-0, 3-1, 5-2, 6-0, 4-0, 3-0. A 2-1 away win over Feyenoord is the only game in the league that they haven't won by 2 or more goals. Then 2-0, 4-0, 3-1. They're just running away with it. Sweeping teams aside. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy to me. All right, I'm going to take a break. I've been going for a while. We'll come back. We'll do Mourinho as the nostalgia, because I don't really have time for today to do a whole big nostalgia thing and cover him. So we'll just do him, and we'll do him as nostalgia. So we'll have a look back at Mourinho and why it's kind of sad to see where he is. See you in a sec. Right, welcome back. So we're going to talk about Jose, because obviously he has been sacked by Roma, as we said. And it's tough to see. Now, look, for some people, maybe it's easy. For some people, maybe they're delighted to see this, because a lot of people don't like him. I love him. I think he's brilliant. I think he's incredibly good value. And I think he's one of the most important figures in the history of football. And he's been a manager at an elite level now for 21 years. This would be season 22, beginning in 2002, when he's appointed manager of Porto. He'd obviously had a very brief spell with Benfica off the back of a recommendation from Bobby Robson. It didn't work. They got rid of him quite quickly. They didn't really give him a chance to see if it would work. He managed 11 games, won 6 of them. Only lost 2, though, but he was sacked. He went to União. He was there from the summer until January 2001 to the beginning of 2002. 23 games, 12 wins, 8 draws, only 3 defeats. Proving very early on that what he's going to give you is a team that's really, really hard to beat. The football won't always be pretty, but they'll be really hard to beat. So he takes over with Porto in the January. They're a mess. He gets them to the end of the season. And then he starts to work. In the first season, they win the Premier League and they win the UEFA Cup. And it's in that UEFA Cup run that everybody starts to get to know him. So back then, the UEFA Cup is still the UEFA Cup. So it's 2-round knockout the whole way through. They beat Polenia of Warsaw. They beat Austria Vienna. They beat Lens. They beat Denizlispor. They beat Panathinaikos. Then they wiped the floor with Lazio in the first leg of the semi-finals. And as a Celtic fan, you're watching this, looking at the other semi-final and thinking, okay, who's going to be in the final? If we get there, who's going to be in the final? Because Celtic's path, once they knocked out Liverpool and got Boa Vista, Celtic's path was quite straightforward. Celtic were going to beat Boa Vista. They were a better team. You're looking at the other draw. You're looking at a Lazio team that had been great, but then started to get broken up. A lot of the key players left because of their financial situation. And you're looking at Boa Vista, or you're looking at Porto and thinking, I don't know a huge amount about them. So, get to the final. It's one of the games of football that annoyed me watching it more than any other in my entire life. They were horrible to play against. From early on, they were finding ways to kill the clock and run the game down. And they go 1-0 up in stoppage time at the end of the first half through Derlei. Come out for the second half, Henrik Larsson scores straight away, 1-1. Then Alenichev scores on 54. Larsson equalises again. And Porto are time wasting. And there's cynical fouls everywhere. And there's diving galore. You get the extra time. 115 minutes in. And Derlei scores the winner. And it was genuinely heartbreaking. Because that was a tremendous Celtic team. With Johan Mjalby, Paul Lambert, Stilian Petrov was one of my favourite Celtic players. Neil Lennon was there, Alan Thompson was there, and you had Larsson and Sutton up front. It was a really, really good team. And they just came up short. Because Mourinho game planned better than Martin O'Neill did. Celtic were a little bit too naive at times in that game. And Celtic were the better team. Porto had probably the best individuals on the pitch in Deco, in Costinha, in Ricardo Carvalho. But they also had some pretty average players. Celtic had the best player. The best individual was Henrik Larsson. Porto had a couple of great individuals, but overall Celtic were stronger. Celtic were like a Toyota Land Cruiser. Big, strong, tough, will run forever. All the pieces work together perfectly. It's not the most attractive of things, but it works brilliantly and it will work forever. And Porto were like a Range Rover. Some fantastic features, but when you dug down into it, a lot of issues. Bahia and Jorge Costa, they were past their best. Nuno Valente was fairly average. Costinha and Maniche, for all their talent, had been underperformers. Alenichev had been an underperformer. Capucho was fairly average. Derlei was decent, but not great. But Mourinho killed any Celtic momentum. Because what Celtic used to do was swamp teams. And what Jose did brilliantly was he found ways to kill your momentum. So you never got on top of his team. If he felt you getting on top of his team, he'd figure something out. He'd make a change. He'd get his team to start pulling and dragging, make the game a little bit dirty. Or he'd have his centre-backs just knock the ball 5 yards this way, 5 yards that way for a couple of minutes and just kill any kind of tempo that you were trying to build. And Costinha, who was vital to that team, he went off after like 8-9 minutes, was replaced by Ricardo Costa, who was decent. But he was a defender and he went in and played in midfield. Anyway, Porto win the UEFA Cup. It's the first major European trophy for Jose. He's won his league title. Now he's won a European trophy. I should point out as well that in the Premier Liga, they won the title by 11 points. Won it moving away very, very comfortably. 03-04, they defend their league title. They win it by 8 points. They win the Super Cup. And then they win the European Cup. I mean, given the era it was in, it's probably the most surprising European Cup. It's certainly the most surprising Champions League win. Because even when Liverpool won it over Milan and when Chelsea won it over Bayern, and Chelsea won it again over City, even though those three teams were clearly at talent disadvantages, they were still the elite from the elite leagues. Porto are a huge club, but the Portuguese league is not on the same level. And when you look at how they got there, they go into a group with Real Madrid, Marseille, and Partizan. They finished second. 3 wins, 2 draws, 1 defeat. They lost at home to Real. Then they went to Real and got a point in the last game. Then they knock out Manchester United. Everybody had them going out. Everybody. And what was funny was, at the time, United had obviously won the Champions League in 99, but people were starting to chirp a little bit about Ferguson having only won the one European Cup. And there was starting to be a little bit of pressure because domestically, Arsenal had gone unbeaten this current season here, and Arsenal had been matching United over the 7-year period, including the treble year. Arsenal finished second in the league, runners semi-finals in the FA Cup. So even though United won the treble, it could easily have been Arsenal winning a double and United winning just the European Cup, which obviously is still a great achievement. But we were razor thin in a lot of these years. And now you had Chelsea with Abramovich. So a lot of people were looking at it and going, is the Ferguson era over? Is it going to end, era of dominance over? Is it going to end with just the one European Cup? What's going to happen here? Because Arsenal are winning the league unbeaten and Chelsea are very, very clearly going to become a dominant force here. And what's funny is when they drew Porto, had they beaten Porto, the likelihood is United win the European Cup this year. Because after Porto, they faced Lyon. Now, Lyon were very good and they're in the midst of winning the French title a bunch of years in a row. But you still would have taken United over Lyon 10 times out of 10. Then up next, it was Deportivo, and then the final is Monaco. And United would have been strong favourites to defeat all of them, but Porto knocked them out. Porto win 2-1 in Porto. Benny McCarthy gets both goals after they go 1-0 down. They go to Old Trafford. United have the away goal. United only need to win 1-0 and they're through. Paul Scholes scores first half. And then nothing happens. Because as good as Mourinho was at spoiling a game and knowing how to kill tempo for the opposition, Ferguson was a genius at it. And Ferguson had the players who could just take the ball and keep the ball. But in the 90th minute, Castilla scores, and we go from United are going through to Porto are going through in an instant. And Mourinho goes sprinting up the tunnel, up the touchline, giving the fingers to everybody in one of the great moments in football. And on they go. They beat Lyon. They beat Deportivo. They went away and beat Deportivo in the second leg, having drawn at home. And then they got Monaco. And Monaco were a little bit unfancied to get this far as well. In their group, they had finished top ahead of Deportivo, ahead of PSV, ahead of AEK Athens. Then they beat Lokomotiv Moscow, but they had the hard side. They beat Real Madrid and knocked them out. And then they beat Chelsea in what is still one of the biggest upsets we've had in a European Cup semi-final. Chelsea were so heavily favoured. And the funniest part of this is, if Chelsea win that game and go on and, let's say, beat Porto in the final, Jose probably never goes to Chelsea. Because, number one, they're not going to sack Ranieri immediately after winning the European Cup. And number two, Jose wouldn't have had that gravitas of being European Cup winner. So that's a bit of a sliding doors moment in that semi-final. But in the final, it's no contest. It's Mourinho against Deschamps. And Jose wipes the floor with him. And Porto wiped the floor with Monaco. Carlos Alberto, Deco, and Elenichev off the bench get the goals. But you can look at that team and you can see how he's strengthened it. He's brought in Pedro Mendes. He's brought in Carlos Alberto. He's brought in the likes of Benny McCarthy for the bench. He's moved players that he deemed not good enough to the bench or out of the squad entirely. And they just dominated the game from start to finish. So 3 years in, basically, take the Benfica time and throw it out the window. 3 years in as a full-time manager, starting a season in charge of a team. He's done a really good job with União. He's gotten the Porto job. He's won 2 league titles, the UEFA Cup and a European Cup in 3 years. That is absolutely remarkable what he was able to do. From there, he goes to Chelsea. And he builds one of the best teams the Premier League has ever seen. And they win the league title in his first 2 years there. He wins the League Cup in his first year. He wins the League Cup and FA Cup double in his third year. And he probably would have won a third title in a row if not for some really bad luck with injuries in 06-07. But credit to United, they capitalised and won the league. Then midway through the next season, well, early in the next season, September, he gets sacked because they've started the season badly and rumours are he's fallen out with Abramovich over Shevchenko and a bunch of other things. But he spends basically 3 full seasons in England, then plus a bit of the next one. There is absolutely no doubt that his Chelsea team were the best team in the league from the minute he walked in until the end of that third season. Even if United won the title, Chelsea were the better team. He built an absolute behemoth defensively. They were so powerful in midfield. And then the attack with Duff and Robin either side of Didier Drogba was just impossible to stop. And obviously it evolved as time went by. Joe Cole would play a bit more, etc., etc. But you look at the players he brings in. First summer, Petr Cech, Arjen Robben, Didier Drogba, Ricardo Carvalho. That is 4 of the generation's best players in their respective positions. And they marched to the title. Like it wasn't even like a question from early on. Chelsea were winning the league. You could tell by like October, Chelsea are winning the league. They lost once all season away to Man City. And they just swept teams aside left, right, and centre. And there was nothing anybody could do with them. They didn't go top until the start of November, but everybody knew Chelsea are winning the league this year. Chelsea are winning the league. Nobody's getting to them. Arsenal had started the year really well, but you knew Chelsea were just going to be too much, too physical. They were able to... The great thing about Wenger's unbeaten team, Ferguson's best teams, Capello's best teams, and Mourinho did it as well. He was able to match the physicality with the technical side of the game. So they could turn up and they could outplay you, but they could also turn up and just outfight you. If you wanted to turn a game into a scrap, they had no problem doing it. And that team that year had a check in goal. You had Carvalho and Terry at centre-back, William Gallas playing left-back, Paulo Ferreira playing right-back. They were just tremendous defensively, with Makelele sat in front of them. Joined in midfield, obviously, by Frank Lampard. Joe Cole would play a decent role. Thiago Mendes was his secondary kind of roaming ball winner. You had Robin and Duff. Now, Robin missed half the season, but Robin and Duff as the wingers was the preferred starting two. Cole played a lot because Robin got hurt. And Drogba up front. Plus Eidur Gudjohnsen, who was just fantastic for them. Absolutely fantastic for them that year. That was a great team. You go into year two, and rather than resting on your laurels, he goes and signs Michael Essien. Now, that's the only good signing they made that year. They signed Asir Del Horno, talented left back, but wasn't suited to the Premier League. Lassana Diarra would go on and have a good career. It was just after he left Chelsea. And I never understood the Sean Wright-Phillips signing. I never understood it. It just didn't make any sense. But they went top in week 3, and it was just obvious they're winning the league again. They lost 5 league games that year, but 2 of them were the last 2 when the title was wrapped up. They finished 8 points clear of United, but again, they lost the last 2 because the title was wrapped up. Him not winning the Champions League at Chelsea, I would say, eats at him. I would imagine it eats at him because there's no doubt they were the strongest team. In year 3, they signed Michael Ballack and Ashley Cole. So now your midfield has Essien, has Ballack, has Lampard. You have sold a few players, but you've got, nobody of great importance. You've got Ashley Cole coming in at left back. Gallas went out in that deal. He was the one of importance. But Czech, still incredible. Ashley Cole at left back, obviously an old-timer. Khalid Boularouz arrived that year. Wasn't very good. Carvalho and Terry in the middle. Ferreira at right back. You also had Wayne Bridge there that would play fairly regularly. Up front, you got Shevchenko, who was never going to work. Kalou came in and started playing an important role. But it's that quality of midfield. Essien, Makelele, Lampard, Ballack. You still got Robin. Duff would have left. Duff would have been probably the one star turn that left. I still don't know why, but he did. Um, they they were so good. They were always kind of one player short of kind of perfect. Sometimes two, but they were so close to being just utterly unstoppable. And then for whatever reason, we go into that fourth season. They bring in Maluda, they bring in Anelka, they bring in a Ivanovic, and you're looking at it and thinking, okay, Anelka could play right of the front three. Maybe that's the play here. Or maybe they're moving to a front two with Drogba and him, and maybe you're going to bring in another midfielder. Because they had been moving to a diamond midfield, with Essie and Makelele, Lampard and Ballack. So they'd moved to that, and you were sort of looking and thinking, okay, that could make sense to go with the two up top. Then obviously Makelele is aging. He's getting ready to wind down his career. Robin leaves because he's no longer seen as an important figure. Maluda comes in. He can play multiple positions. And they sack him in September. Like, they had a bad run in the league. And by a bad run, I mean, they'd lost one and drawn one when they decided to sack him. Which was, very, very strange. And the funny thing is, they could have won the league easily that year. They only finished 2 points off United with Avram Grant in charge. And they got to a European Cup final with Avram Grant in charge. If Mourinho had been in charge, I think they win both. But he's not, and he heads on. And he lands at Inter Milan next. And obviously, Serie A is in still a state of turmoil after the Calciopoli scandal. But Inter have won multiple league titles under Roberto Mancini. They want to win the European Cup, so they go and get Jose. In his first year, he wins the league because, look, winning that league, I'm not giving him a huge amount of credit for because it wasn't very good. But in year 2, he wins the treble. He wins the European Cup with Inter Milan. Think about him winning the European Cup with Porto and Inter Milan and not winning it with Chelsea in between. How odd that is. Considering he had the money and everything else he could ever want at Chelsea. But it wasn't to be. He would win it at Inter. And that team was phenomenal. Like, it's not a team... Well, it is a team flush with stars, but not like in the way Chelsea were. Like, these were great players, but a lot of them were old. A lot of them were kind of underappreciated. You look at the defense, you've got Maicon at right back. Excellent. This is the period where he is really flying. You've got Julio Cesar in goal. Arguably at the time, the top 3 keeper in the world. Lucio and Walter Samuel, both the wrong side of 30, playing at centre-back. They were great that year. Christian Kivu at left-back. Really, really good. Very underrated, underappreciated player. Javier Zanetti, obviously career right-back, but he'd moved into midfield. Cambiaso, always underrated. And Dejan Stankovic, who's one of my favourite players. And again, very underrated. Then Wes Schneider in the 10 spot, Diego Milito, and Samuel Eto'o up front. Now, other players played a lot. Thiago Motta, Mario Balotelli, Sully Montari, Ivan Cordoba, Goran Pendev, Diego Santon, Marco Materazzi. Patrick Vieira was there. He was well past his best and was suffering with injuries, but he played his part. Ricardo Quaresma. There was a really, really strong squad there. He was lucky with what he inherited, but he added to it very well. whether it was loans, like bringing in Quaresma, bringing in Decor, bringing in Pandev, bringing in Schneider, obviously, who had kind of not worked at Real. But the genius was the Zlatan transfer. They got 50 million and Etu for Zlatan. And Zlatan is great. Don't get me wrong. This is not a knock on him. But to get Etu and that big bag of cash and then go and spend that money on Diego Milito, Thiago Motta, Lucio, to buy your squad, basically. Wes Schneider, they changed a bunch of that first 11 that summer, but they had the squad already to make it all work. That team were really good. I know a lot of people knock that year's Champions League run, but like in the group stage, they were in with Barcelona. They drew in Milan. They lost in Barcelona. They finished second in the group. Then they knocked out Chelsea, a good Chelsea team as well. Then they knocked out CSKA. Then they beat Barcelona. The Messi, Busquets, Iniesta, Xavi, etc., etc., etc. Pep Guardiola is the greatest of all time, yada, yada, yada. They beat that Barcelona team. And they just beat them. They beat them up. They absolutely battered them in that first leg. They beat them 3-1. They let Barca do what Barca do, and then they just took the ball off them and they punished them. And they blended the physicality and the technicality perfectly. And then they went to the Camp Nou and they just spoiled the game. But the reason they spoiled the game that always, always gets ignored is that Thiago Motta was sent off after 28 minutes. They had to spoil the game. They had to time waste. So when people say to me, oh, yeah, but they played anti-football. Yeah, because they were up by 2 goals, but Barca had an away goal. So really, they're only up by 1 goal, because if Barca get 2-0 up, they're now through and Inter are out. So they've basically got a 1-goal lead to cling to, and they're down to 10 men away to the best team that many people believe they've ever seen. So, of course you're going to spoil the game. Any manager with any common sense would do exactly what Mourinho did. And then in the final, they played Bayern. And Mourinho runs into one of his former players in Arjen Robben. It's a Bayern team with a lot of talent, a lot of young talent. Bastian Schweinsteiger, Thomas Muller. It's a Bayern team that are favourites, even though, and I didn't understand why they were favourites, because I look at those teams and I think that Inter team is better. Now, Inter played Pandev left wing, Etu right wing, and actually went quite attacking. Left Stankovic on the bench in that final. And they counterattacked the shit out of Bayern. They went with an attacking team and still just counterattacked them. Invited them on. Zanetti and Cambiasso sat back in front of the centre-backs. They let Bayern come and play to them, took the ball off them, gave it to Schneider. Schneider, in turn, finds Etu one side, Pandev the other. And Milito is the happiest man in the world as he scores 2 goals and Inter win the European Cup. And from there, Jose goes to Real Madrid. And his time at Real, for some reason, is often seen as a failure. But again, look at the Barcelona team he's going up against. Like, how can it be a failure to finish second to that team? He won the Copa del Rey in his first year. I know that they had Cristiano and Kaká and all these players. But look at that team. Look at that Barcelona team that he's gone up against. Barcelona, who, by the way, win the European Cup in this same season. In year 2, Jose wins the league. 100 points, a plus 89 goal difference. For all the talk of anti-football, his team outscored Barcelona by 7 goals. And Barca actually concede less goals. And Real did what great Mourinho teams do. They got on top early. They went top of the league in late October, and they never gave it up. Because what Jose believed was that if you have something to hold on to, you'll fight harder to hold on to it than you will to find it in the first place. And from the minute they went top, they had lost to Levante in the third game of the season. Yeah, third game of the season. They had lost to Levante. But from the minute they went top, they only lost one more game the rest of the way in the league. They lost at home to Barcelona 3-1. And they beat everybody else. And with 5 games to go, they went to Barcelona and Mourinho put on a clinic. And they came away with the win and they came away with the title. 9 points clear of the greatest club team, certainly since Sacchi. I would put the Sacchi Milan team thing, but it's a top 2 club team ever. And Jose beat them by 9 points. And not only that, but he did it in a way where Pep resigned at the end of the season. And a lot of people felt like Pep didn't want to compete with that Real team. He talked about burnout and this and that. He'd only been a manager for 4 seasons. Pep was talking about burnout, about pressure. Mourinho was 10 years in. Pep didn't feel like he could go toe-to-toe with that team. Now, that might not have been the reason. He might have had other reasons. But I like to run the narrative that Jose ran Pep out of Spain and Pep hasn't been back since. That season is the last great Mourinho season. That 10-year run, União, Porto, Chelsea, Inter, Real to that point, in my opinion, is the best 10-year run any manager other than Bob Paisley has ever had. 2 Premier League titles, 2 Premier League titles, 2 Serie A titles, and a La Liga title. 7 titles. And one of the years he didn't win the title, he was only managing Porto for half the season. And one of the other ones, he was sacked in September. The only season he actually completed with the same team and didn't win the league, he finished second with Chelsea. Oh, 2 seasons. Sorry, finished second with Chelsea, second with Real. 2 seasons. So you've got 11 it's actually 11 seasons, 10 years, 11 seasons. 7 league titles, 2 second place finishes, and both of the other seasons, one he didn't actually manage, which is why I was saying 10. He didn't actually really manage in the 07-08 season because he got sacked in September and sat out till the following summer. So it's 10 seasons. It's 10 seasons in 11 years, whatever it is. You know what I mean? He also, in that time, wins 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 domestic cups and a UEFA Cup on top and 2 European Cups. That it might actually be better than Bob Paisley's run. It might actually be better than Bob's run. Because he did it in 4 different countries. I don't think we'll ever see anybody have a decade like that. Starting with the 02-03 season, when he wins the league title and the UEFA Cup with Porto. Carrying on, wins the league title and Champions League with Porto. Then he wins the league title and League Cup with Chelsea. Then he wins the league title with Chelsea. Then we have his first season starting and ending with the same club where he doesn't win the league, but he wins both domestic cups. Then he basically has a year off. Then he wins Serie A and the Super Cup with Inter. Then he wins a treble with Inter. Then he has his second season, including the European Cup, of course. Then he has his second season not winning the title, finishing second behind Barcelona, but does win the cup. And then he wins the league. That, to me, is just the greatest run we've seen from a manager. Paisley, I'm happy to put the argument, 6 league titles, 3 European Cups. Unbelievable. I would probably, the 3 European Cups versus more league, an extra league title, an UEFA Cup, plus a couple more domestic cups, and doing it across 4 countries, like it's very hard to judge. One or the other. But I don't think anybody else is in that discussion for the best 10-year run. And with Bob, it was 9 years. It's unreal. Absolutely unreal. And I know he went back to Chelsea and he won a league title. And I know he went to United and he won the League Cup and the Europa League. And I know he went to Porto and won the Europa Conference League. But he hasn't been the same since the end of that first season, end of that second season at Real. Because in the third season, he lost the dressing room. And it had never happened to him before. Like when he was at Chelsea the first time and when he was at Inter, those players would have died for him. He had that dressing room so firmly grasped in his hand. Him and those players were like one. And they formed this incredible siege mentality where it's us against the world. And go and look at the home record. Go and look at the home record across the 10 years I went through. Honestly, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. He was a phenomenal manager. And we should remember him for that first 10 years, from 02 to 12. Not from 12 through to now. He's still a good manager. But that 10-year run, that's all-timer stuff. That is absolutely ridiculous what he accomplished. And where he accomplished it. And how he accomplished it. And people would say, oh, checkbook manager. He didn't spend all that much at Porto. He didn't spend all that much at Inter. Look at the net spend. He didn't spend all that much at either of those clubs. He won European Cups with them. But, you know, you look at sacks, wins the league with Chelsea, gets sacked the next year. Wins 2 cups, finishes second with United, sacked in year 3. Goes to Tottenham, gets them to a cup final, but ultimately gets sacked, goes to Roma, and ultimately gets sacked. And the funny thing with Jose is, I can't imagine, like, no matter whether you love him or you hate him, and no matter what way you judge him, you have to include him in, he's a top 10 manager of all time, at the very worst. He was sacked by Benfica. He was sacked by Chelsea the first time. He was sacked by Chelsea the second time. He was sacked by United, sacked by Spurs, and now sacked by Roma. Been sacked 6 times. There can't be anyone else on that list who was sacked that many times. There can't be. He's had such a bizarre career. Thing is, he's only 60. He's been around forever, but he is only 60. So he still probably has a desire to keep managing. But through 1,133 games, he's got a 61.87% win rate and a goal difference of plus 1,169. So you can talk about anti-football all you want. The fact of it is, Jose just wins. And he wins in pretty dominant fashion when it works for him. I hope he goes into international football next. I think that's where he's more suited at this point. But you look at his win rate through his career with Benfica, 54.55, with Unia, 52.17, with Porto, 71.65, with Chelsea, 67.03, with Inter, 62.04, with Real, 71.91, with Chelsea in the second term, 58.82, with United, 58.33. Like, if you're winning 58% of your matches, you're doing a pretty good job. At Spurs, rather, it dropped to 51.19. But this job with Porto, with Roma, is the first time he has won less than 50%. He's at 49.28%. He won 68 out of 138 matches. Porto, Chelsea, Inter, Real, he was untouchable. He was untouchable as the best manager in the world. Since then, one league title, one domestic cup, two domestic cups. 14-15, he won the League Cup as well. One league title, two domestic cups, and two European trophies. If he retires tonight, he goes down as one of the greats. Simple as. 8 league titles, 2 European Cups, 2 UEFA Cups, Conference League. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 if you want to count the Community Shield, 12 domestic cups. Like that, it's just a phenomenal record. It just is a phenomenal record. World's best club coach 4 different times. FIFA World Coach of the Year once. The Onsdor Coach of the Year once. Premier League Manager of the Season 3 times. Serie A Coach of the League twice. He's been there 2 years with Inter, won it both years. The Miguel Muniz Trophy, which I believe is the Manager of the Year in Spain. He won it twice in his first 2 years with Real. UEFA Manager of the Year twice. World Soccer voted him the 3rd greatest manager of all time in 2013. ESPN voted him 9th best at that point. In 2019, France Football voted him 13th, which is too low. But it shows how much his stock had dropped. He won the BBC Sports Personality of the Year. Not that it means anything, but he won that as well. He was phenomenal. He was absolutely phenomenal. And unfortunately, the shine is gone. Either international football or just call it a day and go and be a pundit, because he's brilliant at that as well. I'll never not love Jose. I don't care. I think he's brilliant. I'll see you after the break. Right, welcome back. So, last bit, we will do the news and the gossip. Ivan Toney is free to play again after his 8-month FA ban expired. I think it's massive for Brentford to get him back because they really have been struggling. It's just good to have him back because he's an incredible player, and it's just great to have him back playing football. DAZN have removed the paywall for all women's football matches, including Champions League, to help promote the women's game. That's massive. That is brilliant news. That should be really good for everybody. Great opportunities to watch some really, really talented players. Eni Aluko, who obviously former player, now commentator, said that she has been genuinely scared after receiving online abuse. She was obviously the target of that prick, Joey Barton, who compared her and Lucy Ward to Fred and Rose West in what was a vile comment. And she has been subject of absolute torrents of abuse, whether directly or just about her. Some of the things I've seen said about her have been absolutely disgusting. And people should be ashamed of themselves. Gary O'Neill has said that Wolves' policy in the summer of selling as many players as they could, even players they wanted to keep, has been justified because, unlike Everton and Nottingham Forest, they were not charged with breaching the Premier League's financial regulations. And you have to admit, he is spot on. What else do we have? Karim Benzema has filed a defamation lawsuit against the French Interior Minister for accusing him of having links to the Muslim Brotherhood. Gerald Darmanin said in October that Mr. Benzema has a notorious link with the Sunni Muslim Islamist group. Well, aren't you going to be in a bit of trouble? That fella is a prick, though. And he's one of those that came rushing out to blame Liverpool fans for the horrendous organisation and security at the European Cup final a couple of years ago. So I hope Benzema pushes forward with that lawsuit and takes him to the absolute cleaners. Xavi has said he will pack his bags and leave if his players lose faith in him. I think he's getting far too much criticism for how this season is going. Last season, they won the title way ahead of schedule. This season, they're about where they should be. I know people are upset because they have lots of talent, but they're missing players in vital areas. They're not ready to really compete at the highest level season after season just yet. Give it time. Jordan Henderson, as I said earlier, close to joining Ajax. It's also been reported that he offered his services to Barcelona. So if nobody minds, I'm just going to go and offer my services to the Atlanta Falcons to be their new head football coach, because I just think it looks fun to coach in the NFL. And I know they need a coach, so I'm going to offer. I have as much chance of getting the job as Jordan Henderson did of playing for Barcelona. Carlo Ancelotti has said that Ferland Mendy is the best defensive fullback in the world. That might be true. Ivan Toney. Just looking, Matteo Politano has agreed a new deal with Napoli. Henderson is to have his medical in the next couple of days. Cyril Ngonge is joining Napoli from Verona. Okay. Geraldo Becker is on his way to Real Sociedad. That's a good signing for them. Sergio Reguilon is on his way to Brentford on loan. Rafael Santos Borre has signed for Internacional in Brazil from Eintracht Frankfurt. Roberto Firmino will apparently now not leave Al Ahly in January. Gift Urban, like I said earlier, on his way to Lyon. I like that signing for them. Renan Lodi has joined Al Hilal on loan with an obligation to buy. Villa have completed the signing of Serbian right back Kosta Nedeljkovic. I'll learn it eventually. He'll join them next season. That, I think, is everything. Oh, Chelsea are willing to let Armando Broja leave on a permanent deal if a suitable offer is received. Interest from multiple clubs, including Fulham, West Ham and Wolves, not contingent on Chelsea signing a replacement. The loan for Reguilón to Brentford is a straight loan, no option to buy. And that is basically it, folks. That is what I have today. Thank you as always. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Social Podcast Network.
Tired of ads barging into your favorite news podcasts? Good news. Ad-free listening on Amazon Music is included with your Prime membership. Just head to amazon.com/ad-free news podcasts to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads. Enjoy thousands of Acast shows ad-free for Prime subscribers. Some shows may have ads.